This brief audio lecture with visual support will focus on school disability law. It's an overview of Module 2 and the laws related to special education. Now, when the topic of laws and policies come up, many times people think about negative things related to them. For example, the words and concepts that are frequently used can be a bit confusing or long-winded and difficult to understand. This doesn't certainly make the topic of laws fun and exciting. But as educators, it's important for us to have at least a basic understanding of the laws related to special education, because even if we never have to quote exact wording, we're expected to uphold and adhere to those laws. So the visuals that follow will provide some general information and will kind of bullet point what I'll be saying about the laws that apply to the education of students with disabilities in K-12 public schools in our country. But I think this will be interested to the few students in our class who are also interested in public libraries. I hope that you won't find the presentation of this information too boring. Here we go. The Rehabilitation Act of 1973 is really the first legislation to address equal access by people who have disabilities by paying specific attention to the barriers that must be removed in order for this access to exist. The Rehabilitation Act of 1973 now contains several important sections that have expanded its definition. Section 501 places specific emphasis on the government's hiring practices, especially the fact that the government cannot prohibit someone from being employed simply because he or she has a disability. And further, Section 501 establishes that affirmative action measures must exist to encourage the hiring and promotion of persons with disabilities. Section 502 established the Architectural and Transportation Barriers Compliance Board, which is responsible for ensuring accessibility of buildings and transit vehicles, that is. Section 503 of the Rehabilitation Act is focused on ensuring that businesses who have contracts and subcontracts with federal agencies are engaging in non-discriminatory hiring practices. We will hear Section 504 and the term 504 plans mentioned a couple of times in our class because it relates directly to K-12 school settings. While Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act does not provide funding for special education services, it does prohibit agencies and institutions that receive any form of federal assistance, and in this case schools, from disallowing people with disabilities to participate in the organization's programs and activities. So let's move on to the Americans with Disabilities Act. The Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, was signed into law in 1990. Like the various sections of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, the ADA focuses on stopping discrimination and promoting accessibility. However, unlike the sections of the Rehabilitation Act, which was concerned with federal government and agencies or institutions who receive federal funding, the ADA focuses on non-discrimination and providing access to public spaces or places of public accommodation, such as stores and malls, restaurants, hotels, and libraries. This week we also focus on IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act is considered the special education law in our country. IDEA determines how schools, school districts, and public agencies deliver special education and the additional services needed as support for special education. IDEA mandates that each student with a disability is entitled to a free, appropriate public education, FAPE. One of the ways to ensure that the education a student with a disability receives is not only free but also appropriate is through the implementation of an individual education plan, or IEP. The IEP is constructed by a team which includes the student's parents and various educators in the school community. The team meets to discuss the student's areas of strength and the areas that need to be strengthened, and then works together to develop a set of measurable goals for the student. You're going to learn more about the IEP when you work through the current module. And when you're learning about what goes into an IEP, consider what you think your role as a librarian might be with respect to contributing to a student's IEP. This presentation was an overview of the laws pertaining to the topics that you're going to encounter in Module 2. You're going to get a lot more details and also activities when you participate in the Project Enable side of things. And as I'm sure you realize, the history behind the various laws related to special education is quite extensive. You might decide that you want to learn more, and if this is true, I'm presenting you with a few links to get you started on this frame. That's what I have for now. Don't hesitate if you have any questions to give me a call or an email, and I hope that you enjoy working through all the readings and activities in Module 2.